Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nate Gruber, Economic Development Director for the Town of Garner, and proudly serve on the NCDA Board of Directors. I'm excited to be your MC for today's webinar. I even got a haircut for this special occasion. Today's webinar is the EDPNC 2025 Real Estate Report. We're happy to have you with us. I'm also a proud EDPNC alumni and always appreciate the great work they do for all of us in the North Carolina economic development community. Before starting the program, I'd like to acknowledge NCDA's annual sponsors, whose logos you'll see on the screen now. These companies and organizations support every component of NCDA's expansive mission and our growing body of programs, and you'll see their logos and names on the screen. We thank all these sponsors for their generous support. Webinars that benefit our membership, like this one, result from their support. Today, we're delving into the realm of real estate development and its significance for communities and businesses in North Carolina. Today's presentation will equip you with the insights and resources needed to navigate this landscape effectively. During this webinar, we'll take a closer look at the project activity that defined 2025. Our presenters will explore key trends and project types, industry sectors, lead sources, and shifting real estate needs. Whether you're focused on site readiness, business recruitment, or long-term planning, this overview will provide timely, data-driven insights to help you stay competitive. Before we begin, we'd like to recognize the sponsor of EDPNC's 2025 Real Estate Report, North Carolina's Electric Cooperatives. Anna Walker, Economic Development Manager for the cooperatives, and my fellow NCDA board member and friend, will join us for a few opening remarks. Anna will then introduce our presenters, one of which is Garrett Wyckoff, who prefers to be addressed as the maestro. Fun fact of a unique connection that Anna and Garrett have in common: they both spent a great deal of time in Princeton, New Jersey. Anna attended and graduated from Princeton University, and Garrett's favorite Wawa growing up in Princeton was on the Princeton campus. So basically, they had the same similar Ivy League experience. Garrett will lead us through today's program, and we'll have time at the end for a Q&A session at the end. Anna, welcome.
Thank you so much, Nate. I didn't realize I needed to have my hoagie order ready for this welcome today, but did want to say good afternoon and happy Wednesday to everyone. As Nate so kindly introduced, I am Anna Walker, the Economic Development Manager for North Carolina's Electric Cooperatives. We're thrilled to sponsor today's webinar and the EDPNC's Real Estate Report again this year. As you'll hear about from Lena and from Garrett, the maestro, throughout this presentation, and as you probably already noticed in your own work and in your own communities, high impact and transformative projects, they're pushing further into rural and suburban areas across the country and our own state. As an example of the mega sites, select sites, and Western North Carolina select sites announced over the last few years, the North Carolina's electric cooperatives serve 5 of these 25 sites. So further illustrating that industrial sites, buildings are becoming more and more spread out, not just in your normal traditional metro areas. Our economic development team, newly rebranded as your cooperative ready partners, and all 26 of our electric cooperatives stand prepared to support commercial and industrial projects through several resources. We have grants for site identification and due diligence and development through our site readiness program, technical assistance for state, federal, and foundation grant programs, including grant writers and legal assistance as needed, and 0% interest rate loans for infrastructure, buildings, and community development projects. Our co-ops serve portions of 93 of the 100 counties in the state. So no matter where you're calling in from today, you probably have a cooperative somewhere in your backyard in your county. If you don't know which cooperative serves your area, or if you want to learn more about any of our programs that support economic development, please give me a call and we can certainly get you set up. Your Cooperative Ready partners are here to support the prosperity of all of your communities, and we look forward to continuing to work with our partners, with everyone on the phone today, and everyone in NCEDA, and with the illustrious EDPNC to keep North Carolina the #1 state for business for many years to come. I'll hand it over now to the incomparable Garrett Wyckoff, fellow Ivy Leaguer, as we have now determined, and the maestro and product development manager for the EDPNC to start the presentation.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, somehow I don't believe that our collegiate experience was quite the same, but thank you for that. And special thanks to the to North Carolina's electric cooperatives for their continued support and partnership with this annual report and other bigger projects that we're working on together. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to review the EDPNC Real Estate Report for 2025. This report is one of the most valuable indicators we have because it shows not only the projects North Carolina won, but the real-time demand trends from companies actively considering our state. It gives us insight into what site selectors, developers, and corporate decision makers are looking for, and it helps communities understand how to better position themselves for future opportunities. Today, my colleague Lena Hobbs Brown and I will walk through the key takeaways from this report. We'll have some compare that to some past data that we have, so we can all better understand where the market is headed. Lena's going to take about the first third of the presentation, and then I'll follow up with the second half of the slide deck and then provide some summaries and conclusions before we go to Q&A. So with that, Lena, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Garrett, and thanks, NCEDA and Anna. Appreciate you guys' support. So I'm Lena Hobbs Brown. I'm the Business Recruitment and Existing Industry Specialist at EDPNC. So help to pull together this report and present some of the findings that we have from the report. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. And hopefully I'm sharing this correctly as well. Starting off here, just wanted to give an overview snapshot of all the projects we saw in 2025. So throughout the year, we had 434 new projects created, and that's across both our business recruitment as well as our existing industry teams. That number is pretty in line with what we saw in 2024. In 2024, we had 429 projects created across both teams. So a good project pipeline across our both project management teams. Looking at the primary activities for those projects, we see manufacturing be the number one project activity year after year. They were 79% of our project load this year, and similarly in 2024, manufacturing was also 79% of our project activity type. We'll dive a little bit deeper into these different activities later on the presentation, but that's the overview snapshot for all projects created in 2025. So looking a little bit closer at the project type, we had on-site expansion projects as well as new location projects. And so in 2025, we actually saw an increase in new location projects, a 10% increase from what we saw in 2024. And then we saw a 10% decrease in on-site expansion projects. Something I wanted to note here is that on-site expansions and new location projects don't necessarily always align with like our recruitment team working them versus our existing industry team working them. For example, for new location projects, sometimes you'll see an existing industry manager working a new location project for an existing company that's considering a new operation somewhere else aside from their current location. So just wanted to make a note that those numbers don't necessarily directly align with recruitment versus existing industry. But again, seeing an increased number of new location projects. So North Carolina is increasingly being chosen by companies looking to expand their operations. So again, diving into the primary activity for specifically those new location projects. And actually, I'll note that the rest of the presentation from here on out is focused on new location projects as compared to expansion projects. Again, we see manufacturing and assembly as the primary activity. Most of our projects, 80%, are in that manufacturing and assembly sector. I'll also note that we did see an increase in both back office as well as corporate HQ projects. And so that's representative really of some of those office projects we saw coming back into our pipeline in 2025. And that's really, partly a result of those projects having fallen off during COVID, and coming back to be strong for our 2025 pipeline. I'll also note we did see an increase in data centers, and I'm going to get to that a little bit more in our next slide as well. So here you'll see a little bit more about the scope of some of those different activities. Overall, we saw an increase in some of the median wages for different activities. And then I'll note here what I was mentioning before, we did see an increase in data center projects this year. And this was 8 projects in 2025 compared to 3 projects in 2024. With those data center projects, those ones are specifically data center projects, whereas we also saw an increase in like our manufacturing activities for products related to data centers. So those 8 projects are really representative of true data center projects. That being said, I will say Duke Energy fields the majority of those requests, so EDPNC doesn't work all of necessarily those data center projects as well. On average, those data center projects had a 78 megawatt power requirement as well. So going and looking at some of our project sources, we continue to see site selection consultants and then our internal leads and referrals coming from our business development team being our top 2 sources of projects. Those continuously kind of flip-flop as to which one is the primary source, but you'll see that those were the 2 primary sources for 2025 as they were with 2024. This year, we did see an increase in direct calls from companies as well as a project source. And we think that's representative of North Carolina becoming having more of a reputation both nationally and internationally for the business community. So looking a little bit more at the specific industries for our new location projects, energy was our top industry sector for this year, and that's similar to 2024. Energy projects can encompass a number of different products and processes. We commonly see battery cell manufacturing, electric grid, and power equipment, as well as renewable energy equipment, including solar and wind and energy. Those types of projects are captured within this energy industry sector. One thing I will note this year, we saw a decrease in food, beverage, and agriculture projects compared to 2024. But just looking at the data from 2026, we are seeing those numbers increase again for food, beverage, and agriculture. We also saw an increase in life science projects this year. Life sciences continues to be a primary industry for our pipeline. We continue to see a lot of high impact projects come through with that industry. And then also to note, we saw an increase in business and financial services. And again, that's related to seeing office projects come back around. I mean, a lot of those office projects being in that business and financial services industry. So here is a snapshot of the scope of some of these top industries. You'll see that in the business and financial services, as well as the life science industries, we have high wages associated with those projects, as well as high job counts. So a lot of really high impactful projects coming from those 2 industries. And overall, again, just wanted to emphasize this year we were seeing an increase across many different industries for the average wage of these projects. And with that, I think Garrett is going to take it to dive a little bit deeper into specifically some of those industries.
Yes, thank you, Lena. So yeah, we decided, so the next few slides, we pulled out a couple of these industry sectors that we, kind of wanted to discuss a little bit more. Again, energy last year, the energy sector was our top sector. and talking with, doing some research and talking with Anders out of our business development team. Don't see that trend kind of slowing down anytime soon. But as Lena alluded to, energy can encompass a number of different products and processes. But 36 of the 52 projects that we received last year were designated specifically as clean energy opportunities. You can see there were 15 energy related projects in 2025. When you compare that, we had 45 in 2024. So again, that was the number one sector last year, and we've increased that, and we expect to see that remain going into 2026 and further. Energy remains one of the fastest growing opportunity sectors, but it also highlights the importance of utility readiness, transmission capacity, and industrial site preparedness. When you look at some of the utility requirements that are required with this level of project, they're pretty demanding. So again, it just highlights how we can all be more prepared for when these opportunities arise. Next slide. So in 2025, there were 29 military and defense related projects, which the report notes was double the prior year. These projects spanned across several industries, but most prevalent was defense related projects in aerospace and the aviation industry. This including drone type projects. This is significant because it reflects reshoring, national security priorities, and supply chain realignment. North Carolina's military assets, workforce, and aerospace capabilities position the state very well in this category, and we expect to continue to see, military and military-related things in that sector that are related, again, to aerospace and aviation to continue through 2026 and beyond. Headquarters and office growth. This is the first time in about 5 years or so that it's been actually nice to talk about this slide. So another noteworthy trend is the rebound in office and headquarters projects. There were 35 headquarters or back office projects in 2025, more than double the prior year. And you can see there, when you look at the median jobs and investment in wages, these are all, highly coveted, excellent projects. I think this indicates North Carolina remains highly competitive for professional services, financial services, technology, and management functions. So I think it wasn't so much that North Carolina, we waned in any of those things the past few years. I just think COVID and work from home and some other factors at that time really, dominated the office and headquarters landscape. With more companies now wanting to come back and get folks back into the office, I think we'll continue to see this trend, continue in the future. So a little bit about foreign direct investment. This continues to grow in a meaningful way. International projects accounted for 47% of all new location projects in 2025, compared to 42% in 2024. Nearly half of all new opportunities came from companies headquartered outside the United States. I think really we can attribute some of this recent increase to federal government policy making, i.e., tariffs, but also it demonstrates North Carolina's continued and growing global brand, as well as our international competitiveness. Here you can see the leading international source countries in 2024, much like they were. I believe this was the same top four that we had in 2024. But Canada, China, Germany, and Italy lead the way in our opportunities created. It is not lost on us that this is where the EDPNC has dedicated offices and staff. Up until really last year's data and this year's data, Canada was always, mid to lower pack. But now that we've got a dedicated individual working on specifically business development opportunities in North America and focusing on Canada, it makes sense that we're starting to see that Canada has kind of led the way these past couple of years. Couple things I will note here. Last year or in previous years, this is really the first time Turkey, as a country, has been on this list and fairly high up on this list. Um, One of the things in talking with our FDI team about this is that Turkey, their national economy is very energy sector related, and all the manufacturing around ancillary energy type projects, whether that's solar panels and things of that nature. So I think because we're seeing so much in the energy sector, it makes sense that, with that being such a core of Turkey's national economy, that we're seeing projects out of there now more than we ever have. We'll also note that Japan, again, last year, I think we had 3 opportunities created from Japan, 5 this year, so an increase, but right around that middle of the pack area. One thing to note, though, about Japanese projects is that when they're created and we get them as an opportunity, the win rate with these projects is much higher than some of the other countries. As you can see there, Germany, Italy have 13, 16 FDI opportunities were created where we may have only won like 1 or 2 of those. So Japan remains mid-pack, even though they're a central partner of ours. But the win rate with Japanese projects is much higher than with some of those countries that are higher on the list. So talking a little bit about real estate assistance now, as projects come in. The EDP&C provided real estate assistance on 240 projects in 2025. That is up from 201 in 2024. We think that this means more companies are requiring active help identifying buildings, sites, infrastructure, and location opportunities. That may lend back to the last screen or the last discussion on FDI, where we are seeing, more FDI projects, and those projects tend to need more handholding. I think that, again, this underscores the importance of strong local partnerships and having competitive product ready when leads arrive. So the next few slides, we're really going to kind of get into really a lot of the data points, and you all can read those, but try to give some summary on all of this. But when you're looking at building versus site demand, for manufacturing projects, existing buildings remain the most requested option. In 2025, 51% of requests were for buildings, 29% for sites, and 20% were open for either. I think this tells us that speed to market remains crucial, and this is something that we'll talk about later. And that companies want to move quickly, and move-in ready buildings, often provide the fastest path for them to do so. And then when you compare that, you can see the comparisons to the 23 and 24 data. So it's from a wanting buildings, it's grown steadily over the last 3 years worth of data. So looking at size, if you're looking at buildings square footage requirements, when companies requested buildings, the highest demand was concentrated in that 20,000 square foot to 200,000 square foot range. This represents about 60% of the market. While we recognize that this is a large square footage range, having a building that has the potential, to expand to one of these larger footprints, whether you're currently at, 50 or 100 and can get double, I think that's, could be can be a key takeaway from here if your community does not, either has a shell building that's, in that 50 to 100 range, or even an existing building. I think that expandability, is key and can allow you to hit more of the market when these requests come in. The mid-size industrial product remains the sweet spot for many users. I know it, probably like in our 21-22 data, we had a huge influx of large scoped projects. We are seeing that kind of regression back towards those more mid-size, those middle of the road projects that I think we all, enjoy, and then that don't have maybe as much utility demands and whatnot that some of those larger projects have, and some of the headaches that can come with that. Ceiling height continues to matter. I think the data pretty much, if you go back and look at the last 4 or 5 of these reports, pretty much is right on point with what we see here in 2025. I think for me, the key takeaway, especially if you're looking at potentially, doing a shell building in the, this year or in the coming years, if you can, if you get that building to at least 30 foot clear, then you're going to capture, a majority of the market here. So, again, I feel like the requests are, a lot all over the place, but specifically if you've got, if you're looking at doing a shell building in the near future, it seems like that 30-foot clear mark is key, and then you can capture a lot of the other requests for that have needs that are under that 30-foot clear need. For for acreage requests, again, for greenfield sites, the most common request range in 2025 was 51 to 100 acres. I think, again, highlighting that more of that, those mid-sized projects that North Carolina has been so good at winning in the past. I think this means communities with graded utility served sites in this size range are especially well positioned for activity in the future. Companies also showed increased flexibility regarding ownership structure. You can see here that 37% were open to either buying or leasing. Only 10% specifically required a purchase. And I think this tells us that, again, speed, certainty, and optionality often matter more for these companies than actual ownership. So these next few slides really focus on some infrastructure needs and what we're seeing there. The first here, natural gas. We assisted with 210 real estate requests, 108 of those for a building, 60 specifically for a site, and 42 open to either. You can see here, natural gas remains an important site selection factor. More than half of the projects required gas service, and many building projects did as well. Combined with electric capacity, water, wastewater, and broadband, utility readiness continues to be a major differentiator. And when you look back at the 23 and 24 numbers, this slide as well as the next couple all seem to hold pretty steady with the needs of potential clients. So this slide here, specifically looking at rail service, I think again the data is pretty consistent with past years. You can see here that about if there's a building only request, about 19% need rail with that. And it makes sense if you're looking for a site and going to build out a factory floor plan, that you might need rail. It makes more sense that rail might come along or be needed more with a site request. And I think those numbers there highlight that. And again, hate to sound like a broken record, but pretty much what we're seeing with port service is what we've seen over the last few years. About 21% of our projects, if they're requesting a building, are looking for port service, and about 20% are looking for it if they are looking to take down a site. Site certification interest. I'm on the North Carolina Certified Sites team. This slide always interests me. You can see here that in 2025, with uh, the request that we had, only about 28 projects or 27% had any interest in looking at sites that had specifically been through the state certified site program. I don't think, and I'm probably biased here, I don't think this is a reflection on the program. I think more so it's probably a reflection on just clients' awareness, of the program, especially if we're getting calls directly from a company representative and not a site selector. I have, in talking with site selectors, one of the issues that they have with individual state certified site programs is that they're all a little bit different. There isn't one overarching guideline that every state has to follow to make their site certified. So what may be considered certified in North Carolina could be different than in South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, pick a state. So I think that when we have an opportunity, having all of that data and having the due diligence done and those type of things, if that site is being considered for a project, do elevate it and help it through the process and continue to make the cut throughout that selection process. But I think a lot of it is probably more around those two factors why we don't get a lot of folks specifically asking for sites, North Carolina certified sites. Here, we wanted to highlight for y'all just to kind of give everybody an idea of the kind of the large project activity that we're seeing or that we saw in 2025. We assisted with 18 manufacturing projects that exceeded $1 billion in capital investment. This is a 28% increase from 2024. 17 of the 18 large project requests were for sites. Again, I think that makes sense. There's not a lot, not just in North Carolina, but in many of our competitor states, there's not many, very large buildings just, sitting around being unoccupied right now. You can see here that of these 18, about just over 50%, most of these were in the biopharma, life sciences industry, as well as energy. And we just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a snapshot on, what does the scope of these projects, what do they look like? So we provided for the biotech industry as well as the energy, these specific projects, the average jobs investment, acreage requests, things of that nature, just to give everybody a flair for what these large projects look like.
The other thing I was just going to note here, Garrett, as well, is when we look at the two life sciences and energy being the primary industries for these large scale projects in 2024, the two primary industries for these large scale projects were automotive projects and then aerospace projects as well. So kind of a shift in the industries that we see bringing in some of these large scale projects.
Yeah, excellent. Good note. Thank you, Lena. Here, just talking about again, this slide is pretty much on par as it has been for the last several years. When we look at reasons given for project losses, lack of suitable buildings slash site. So, our inventory, our existing inventory is the number one reason why we are given that we have lost out on a project. Again, this is really from our perspective, no surprise. This category has led the way for several years. One thing I do want to note, though, is that we do also within our Salesforce system, in sometimes when we cancel a project, we may not be given a reason, or we've provided, initial information, and then they go radio silent or, whatever, or maybe they're just doing their due diligence and getting some information from us and comparing us to other states. But projects get canceled for lack of response, meaning the client's lack of response at almost an 80% clip. So that truly is our, main reason why projects get canceled in the system. But, when you specifically look at when the clients give us a specific reason, or they provide that information, that reason has tended to always be lack of appropriate real estate, whether that's a building or a site. And lastly, something we kind of added new to this year that we haven't done in the past is just we've been or the role that I have now, spending a lot of time looking at especially around site development. What are some things that we all need to be aware of, or how the corporate decision makers and or our national site selectors are looking at this industry, is economic development in general. And I really came up with like 5 major items that I think we can expect going forward in how companies and site selectors approach projects. One is that the best sites are the ones with answers already. Site decisions are not just focused on which location offers the best mix of cost, incentives, and access. It is also about timeline. Locations that can actually deliver on time at scale and without late stage surprises will be successful. 28, that number represents 28 months. That is the number of months most manufacturers target for delivery. I know for all of us, if a particular site that we represent, needs to have water extended, or utilities extended or power upgrades, getting some of those materials, the backlog to get, many materials can be at, 28, 36 months, which is not conducive to what our clients are looking to do. So, like I said, the best sites are the ones with answers already. Infrastructure is now the gatekeeper. We saw in 2025 with infrastructure and especially with power and water, go from more of a supporting role in location choices to now becoming the gatekeeper in site decision making. Infrastructure is no longer just a box to be checked. It is the box that determines whether anything else on that site matters. I think most of us already know this one, but it still continues to be a major problem. Workforce readiness. Workforce challenges are less about raw headcount and more about specificity. companies are unwilling to compromise on workforce quality in the name of speed. This is going to lead to slower expansions rather than risk the instability caused by unqualified labor. Workforce development can no longer be reactive. Communities that invest early by aligning education, employers, infrastructure will be better positioned to absorb demand, when it arrives. Incentives relevancy. Incentives do not close gaps in site infrastructure issues, permitting timelines, specialized workforce needs, etc. Instead, functioning as a tiebreaker, meaningful only once a location has demonstrated the ability to execute. Incentives are now less about attraction and more about the reinforcement of a location decision. And lastly, your competitive advantage is execution certainty. Expect a higher level of site, community, and state due diligence by site location consultants and corporate decision makers, especially at early stages in the process. We all need to be prepared. Those locations with aligned infrastructure, coordinated permitting, and workforce strategies already in place will have the best chance to win corporate investment. Preparation and readiness is the only true differentiator now. So, with that, that concludes the actual report. I hand it over to Nate to kind of MC, but we can open it up now for our question and answer session.
Thank you, Garrett and Lena, for sharing your knowledge and experiences with us. And a special thank you to the North Carolina Electric Cooperatives for sponsoring the report. We're now going to see if our audience has any questions. Just a reminder to type any questions into the Q&A box, not the chat box. And Garrett, you are lucky. The first caller calling in from Johnston County, North Carolina, is a future first ballot Hall of Famer, Chris Johnson. I know you know him well. He has a question and a comment. His first comment is he loves your Jake Jarmel glasses and he wants to know where you got them. And his question, sorry, Chris, no luck. His question is under industry sectors, where would companies with DOT or military connectivity be classified?
I think, well, I was going to note we differentiate industry sectors for that, Garrett mentioned that military or defense related projects as a subsector. So we'll in our system we have industry sectors and then that military or defense related projects is a subsector of those industries. So meaning that the company might be manufacturing an aerospace, something related to aerospace. But then we would also note that that manufacturing is for defense or military purposes. So I think military and defense related projects are encompassed in a number of different industry sectors depending on what they're actually making, if it's automotive related or if it's aerospace related, things like that, or if it's energy related, things like that. But then we separately note that it's for military or defense applications, if that makes sense.
Perfect. Appreciate it. Next question is from Casey with Electricities in North Carolina. And Casey is wondering, are there any countries that you expect to grow or fall off the FDI list?
No, as it stands now, I mean, I think because it's only just an additional year, but if we just look at 24 and 25, those top 4 or 5 stayed the same. In talking with the FDI team, they continue to hunt down leads, but I think I don't really expect anybody that isn't on that list, much like we saw with Turkey this year, to really, to jump up, in future years that we haven't seen. I think a lot of that, like I said, is because of where our FDI offices are located and the regions of the world that each of those business developers has, I think we're going to continue to see, that same Central Europe, China, Japan, um, Canada, that I think that's going to remain the focus. India.
Yeah, one that was interesting this year too. I know like we've had some intentional business development efforts. Like Garrett was saying, we had some intentional business development efforts in Brazil this year as well. We saw a little bit of an uptick in Brazilian projects, and we just actually had one of our first Brazilian projects announced recently in a long time. So I think just like what Garrett was saying, when we have intentional business development efforts in certain markets, we tend to see a little bit of an uptick. I think it was the same thing with Australia as well. We did one or two trade shows in Australia and saw a little bit of an uptick in Australian projects. But
Perfect. Thank you both. Another question related to the site certification interest. What are the other states that we're commonly competing with?
Yeah, so I know that many of the states in the Southeast all have a site certification type program. Um, I've also done a lot of research on not just certification programs, but what many of our competitors are doing around, um, much like we're doing with mega sites and select sites, actually having grant dollars or dollars to develop sites. It really is all over the board. You've got some states like Ohio and Virginia that have allocated a lot of resources to site development. And then you've got others, even in the Southeast, that don't really, not that I would consider, sorry, Nate, Florida a huge competitor, but
No
Florida
harm.
doesn't have, other than, like a Duke site readiness program in those Duke territories, they don't really have anything, other than that, So, but we are seeing Kentucky has a really strong grant site development program, as well as Georgia. South Carolina's is fairly strong. I think ours is a bit better. But we're more, definitely seeing more states getting comfortable about, doing, trying to prepare sites for projects in the future and actually having reoccurring dollars or allocations to do that.
Thank you, Garrett. Another question for you here. Can you touch a little bit on the specific details that communities should know related to their site, other than just kind of the basics, i.e., site size, like specific infrastructure details that they would need?
Yeah, everything that now that I'm in the role that I'm in now, and it's really been a sole focus, and a lot of the extra research and just other things I've been doing. I feel like, and this report was not meant to be a broken record, but it really just comes down to, how prepared that site, is. You have to think about, you're not just competing with, other communities in North Carolina. It's, wherever else. It could be a global project, wherever, and, our competitors are, they're doing a lot to get their sites, more ready. So I think it really comes down to, you know, getting as prepared as possible, for those questions. And I don't think that, when you have a site visit or you're filling out an RFI, you don't have to answer yes to everything, because no site, no community is perfect. But if it is a no, you need to have a but, no, but we're doing this, or we're going to be rolling out this workforce plan with our, K through 12, in 2027, or, given, if you're showing that you're aware of, these issues that these corporate decision makers are concerned with and how you're trying to overcome them in your community, I think that goes a long way.
Thanks, Garrett. Can you hit a little bit on what the preferred geographic locations in North Carolina are?
I might, Lena, I don't get
Yeah.
RFIs like Lena or part of that team and see where things are as much. Lena, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I don't know if you've got any insight to how
Yeah.
different regions of the state are doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends. I mean, I think majority of our projects are, are statewide. We send them out statewide. We also, um, have certain projects come in the gate that are interested in a certain region for whatever reason. Maybe that's, because they have a supplier close by, because they're familiar with a certain region. So I think we see, different different regions have popularity for different reasons. I'll also say it depends on the industry too, right? Like this year we were talking about, we saw an uptick in some of those office projects, and obviously a lot of those are looking at the Charlotte region or the Raleigh RTP region. But at the same time, we did see some of those smaller office projects looking at a Greensboro or a Wilmington or some of the smaller metro areas as well. So I think it definitely depends on the industry and the type of project, whether it's a more traditional manufacturing project that might be looking at statewide. But yeah, but that's also something that we'd be happy if someone wants to reach out to me, I'd be happy to pull that in a little bit more detail and look at the granular numbers as well.
Thank you, Garrett and Lena. Our next question is from our friend in the East, Trey Cash. First question's for Garrett, and second question, both you can cover. Garrett, how can I be a better developer than Nate Groover? And the question for the both of you is also, is there any more data on capacity requirements or sizing of natural gas lines needed?
Well, I'll take the softball question and say, Trey, I don't think you can.
Thank you.
Um, if you weren't on here, Nate, I would probably tell Trey that the fact that he gets up every morning means he's a better developer. But you're on the line, so I don't want to say that. Um, I I'll let Lena talk a little bit about this. I would just say in general, natural gas, it's it's difficult because, I guess due to some federal requirements and whatnot, it's hard to get information or what the natural gas companies are allowed to share about their infrastructure, where it's at, things like that. That makes it a little bit difficult to know, specifically about, do they require, and I think it is industry specific on, how much, what the pressure is that they may need for their particular process or the sizing of the line. I think so much of that is, kind of industry specific. Lena, I don't know if you've got any
Yeah, we don't
knowledge of that.
actually track the numbers around natural gas requirements the way that we do with power requirements, or even water and sewer requirements. So we don't, it's not something like we can easily pull, because we don't track those, but it's also something, we could look back through RFIs and things like that and look at some of the requests that we have gotten.
Perfect. Thank you both. I have time for a couple more questions here before we hit the hour. So, next question relates to a hot topic right now in economic development with data centers. They become very controversial in some counties. How do you think this affects the rest of the state locations where they're welcomed?
Uh, I I guess my first thought is that I don't think it helps when, there's so much stuff coming out. Um, I, I think people in general, like they may hear of one specific community or specific communities, saying something about data centers. And I just think it's easy for someone who doesn't live in North Carolina to say, oh, North Carolina isn't interested in data centers. So I don't think that, everybody thinks that, but I think it's not a hard leap to make that, to make that jump to it, I don't think it helps the ones who are interested in data center projects.
And I think it's just helpful for us at the state level if we understand different communities' position, like when we get those requests to be able to clearly know which communities are interested or not interested as well.
And that this leads to a little bit of, you know, almost like, recycling projects, Nate, when you were with the state, it's like they could be a good project, but for the local community, if they're part of the part of that recycling program, then they can have, they're not paying, they're only paying a portion of, property tax and things like that. So I don't know. I think one of the things I would like to do, maybe sooner than later, is even take some kind of survey or poll around data center projects and maybe even those recycling type projects, and see which communities, are want them or don't want them. And then at least then we at the state level have an idea, of when we get a project like that, who is more, when there's an RFI to be filled out or whatever, who is more receptive to that type of project.
Thank you, Garrett and Lena. Appreciate your help on that. For the folks that asked a few other questions that we won't be able to get to, we will capture those and respond accordingly. And in closing here, our friend Patrick Pierce of the North Carolina Railroad wanted to be sure to remind everyone to apply for the North Carolina Railroad Build Ready Sites grant program that's open through May 8th. If you have a site that could use some rail assistance there. Thank you all again for being with us today, and thank you again to the EDPNC team for sharing your insights, experiences, and advice today. NCDA's partnership with EDPNC continues to provide resource and education for our membership that benefit overall economic growth for the state and pave the way for businesses to innovate and thrive. Before we go, I'd like to again to thank our annual sponsors. We couldn't do this without you. As we wrap up, please make plans to join us for our upcoming NCDA events, the Elevating Your Site Visit Game webinar on May 4th, the Triad Regional Networking Luncheon on May 5th in High Point, the 2026 Emerging Executives Forum, May 11th and 12th in Kinston, Legislative Day on May 13th, new member orientation on June 1st, and our annual conference June 17th to the 19th in Wilmington. You can always check the NCDA website as well as our new virtual community Forge for updates. Also, make sure you're following us on our social media platforms like LinkedIn, Facebook, and X. And for those of us in Generation X, I will leave us with the closing remarks that we all should be familiar with. In the words of the late great Casey Kasem, keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. Thank you again for being with us, and have a great day.